What's up guys, welcome back to another video. Today I'm going to be showing you how to get the most out of the threshold effect inside Photoshop for your t-shirt designs. Let's go. Alright guys, so in today's video I'm going to show you two techniques on how to get the most out of threshold. The first technique is what to do if an image just isn't responding very well to threshold and you really want to threshold it anyway, and just how to get a bit more detail out if you find that it's going too white or it's going too black, and just how to find that middle ground. The second technique is how to layer threshold. So we take different layers of threshold and blend them together properly to create a more well-rounded image with the threshold effect. Okay, so first of all, where is the threshold effect located in Photoshop? It's actually located in two places, and it really does matter which one you choose. So the first one is down here in threshold, and the second one is up in image adjustments and down to threshold here. What threshold does is it converts the image into a black pixel or a white pixel, and depending on how far we move this slider about, more white will take over, more black will take over, and you really just need to find a middle ground if you're not planning on going too advanced with the threshold effect. Because the pixels of this image are now either white or black, that makes it very easy to screen print, and also as we build threshold layers, that will also continue to be easy to screen print because the colours are so separated, and that is obviously part of the screen printing process where they separate the colours and then they are put through a screen individually to create the final print. So the reason I've chosen this image here, the gas mask, is because in my opinion it's a little bit difficult to threshold, so it's perfect for giving you the first tip on how to bring out a little bit more detail if threshold just doesn't seem to be working. So what I mean is, if we go towards the left, the white seems to take over a bit too fast. The face looks okay, but we've lost a lot of detail down here, and as we start to bring it back, we've got, you know, down here starting to look good, but we've got no detail in the face, so there's just no happy medium. And a lot of images are like this, particularly ones that just aren't very detailed or high quality. So what can we do to bring back some of that lost detail? The first thing I like to try is adding noise. So make sure the image is selected and not the adjustment threshold layer. Go up to filter, noise, and add noise. And what you're going to see straight away when it actually loads is that by adding noise we can bring back a lot of detail and perhaps save an image if it just isn't thresholding very well. So that's my first tip, and this is one that I use all the time. It's really handy and not a lot of people know about it, so give it a go. Alright guys, so now we're going to have a go at building layers of threshold. What does that mean? So unlike before when we just thresholded that gas mask, we were stuck with one layer of threshold. We tried to find a happy medium, we tried to move the slider left and right until we found a portion of the image that just looks good all round, and then we used a little bit of grain just to try and bring back a little bit of detail that wasn't there. Now what we're going to do is break down the image into shadows, highlights and midtones. We're going to threshold each of them and then blend them together to create almost like an ultimate threshold with a lot more detail. On top of that, we can also fish around for certain parts of the image that threshold particularly well, even if the rest of the image doesn't, and then blend that into the overall composition at the end. So that all sounds complicated, don't worry, we're going to break it down nice and slow. For this part of the tutorial, I've chosen an image deliberately that I know will threshold very well. It has good shadows, good highlights, good midtones, good details overall. It's just going to be perfect for threshold. So the first step is to apply threshold up here and not where we applied it earlier. So we want to go up to image, adjustments, threshold over here. So what we want to do now is hunt around for the midtones of the image, and that's basically what we did at the start of this tutorial. We just want the best all-round threshold. So for me, it would be somewhere around here where we've got enough shadow still. Highlights are obviously missing, but a good all-round threshold looks pretty good to me, somewhere around there. So click OK when you're happy, and threshold will appear underneath the layer this time and not as an adjustment layer on the top. Now we need to go over and select the magic wand tool and make sure that these two boxes, anti-alias and contingent, are not selected. If they are selected, you won't be able to select individual colours. So with them unchecked, click on the white and you'll see now that all of the white is selected on its own and there is no black there, it's just the white. Now we click Ctrl J, and now we've made an individual layer of just the white. So if I turn off all these layers, you can see that we've just made a white layer, and that's exactly what we want to do. So next up we need to add some highlights, but before that we need to change the color of this because it's a mid-tone, which means it can't be white because the highlights obviously have to be white or they have to be lighter than what's here already. So let's change this by adding a color overlay, and we could go for a gray and then we could make the highlights white so you could see them, or we could just go for a crazy red color like this and just see what happens. Why not? It looks good. I quite like the red actually. Let's go with red just for now, and let's turn all this back on. Yeah, that looks pretty cool. So let's stay with the red just for this tutorial. Now we're going to make the highlights, so let's turn off this. Actually, let's rename it first. Midtones. Let's turn off midtones and go back to the original threshold layer. So now if we click threshold down here, we can go back to the threshold slider and we can basically just do a new threshold. So now we need to find highlights, and our highlights are going to be somewhere towards the right here. So it's going to be somewhere around something like this, where we get these nice little streaks of white. And that's just going to add some more detail into the image when we add them. So somewhere around there looks cool to me. So let's try that. I'm going to do exactly the same thing as I did earlier. Select the white, Control J. And now them highlights are on their separate layer. So let's turn this off and turn midtones back on. And you're going to see we need to add the highlights above the midtones so you can see them. And there we go. Look at that. Much more detail. Looks a lot better. One thing we probably want to do though is adjust the opacity so it blends in nicely. Somewhere like that. So that looks really good now. A lot more detail. A lot more professional looking. So now we have the shadows, the highlights and the midtones all done. The shadows in this case will actually be made up by, because this is a merch design, it will be printed on some material like a t-shirt. The shadows will be made up by the t-shirt itself. So there's no need to actually threshold that. An exception to that, of course, would be if we were printing on anything other than black, like a white t-shirt, or we want to add more black into this threshold, which is exactly what we're going to do now, because I want to add a bit more black into this wing. I don't think it looks right. And then we're going to do something about this wing, because this wing isn't perfect either. So first of all, let's turn off the highlights and the midtones that we've just done and bring back the original threshold layer. And now we want to find a little bit of black for that wing. So nothing too crazy. Oh, we're going the wrong way. Something like that. Something that just gives it a little bit of extra detail, but without going too far. Something like that would be perfect. Grab the magic wand like normal and select anywhere that's black this time, not white. Control J. And now we've got a layer with black on it. So if we turn off everything, we can see that. And we want to slot it in between the highlights and the midtones so we can see it. Turn everything back on. And now we need to remove everything apart from just that little bit of black on the wing. So if we stick a little layer mask on it, grab a black brush, we can now remove all of that black and just leave the bit that we want on that wing. So as you can see, that wing now looks a lot better, but we are left with a problem, and that is if we turn off the background, we can see that there is actually black on top of the wing and it's not made up by the background. So if this was to be printed on a t-shirt right now, the printer would print this black and it wouldn't be made up by the t-shirt, and that would just look silly. So we basically need to remove this black from the midtones. So how do we go about doing that? So what we need to do is combine this midtones layer and this new black layer together by holding shift and clicking both layers. Now right click and convert to smart object, and this is going to make them one layer. Now we can rename it quickly. Now head to effects and blending options. And now we need to go to the blend if options, this top one here. If we hold Alt, we can separate this slider, and that will do a smoother job of removing all the black, like so. So now I'm basically just going to repeat that process again, except I'm going to add some more highlights to this wing. Okay guys, that's all the thresholding done. Obviously, you can take your time with this. I'm just giving you a quick example of what you can pull off using this effect and this technique. I really hope you learned something here today. Thank you so much for supporting the channel. Subscribe if you haven't already and check out my store. If you are already subscribed, thank you so much for coming back, and I will catch you in the next video. Peace.